Kathy, good morning. So good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So you probably just heard that story that we read leading into your interview. We actually gave a practical example of how inflation is making everyday life cost prohibitive for many Americans. So what are you hearing on the campaign trail when it comes to inflation?
Yeah, you know what is not outpacing inflation right now? Wages. Wage increases are not outpacing inflation. People are poorer today than they were before this pandemic, unless of course you went into this pandemic with significant assets. If you went into this pandemic with significant assets in the stock market, you are actually better off today than you were before the pandemic. But for the 90% of Americans, you're actually worse off today than you were before the pandemic. And all of this is as a direct result of Biden, the inferior people he has surrounding him, and the ideology of the Democrat Party. None of what we're experiencing as it relates to the shortages, to the supply chain, to the increase in cost in oil and gas and all of that, none of those things are as a result of some kind of natural disaster. They are all as a direct result of the inferior leadership we currently have in office. That is what people are talking about. People are very unnerved. The ones who are being hurt right now are those who can least afford it.
And Kathy, what can be done at this point to control what is slowly but surely has become pretty much an out of control inflation? At this point, what can be done? Because we hear from experts that those rates should have been raised when the inflation started to increase at the beginning of the year, those interest rates. Now they're going to be doing it next month, which a lot of other experts say it's really too late at this point. You got to just let it kind of roll through and kind of see how it comes out instead of putting more issue into the economy. So what are some of the ideas that you have that can control this?
I mean, your finger is all over the right spot right now. I mean, because that's exactly what is happening. You know, the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, the Biden administration, and other Democrats, they started this whole quantitative easing where we saw the Federal Reserve spending roughly $120 billion a month just to buy Treasury bills to keep the interest rate low, to keep the stock market high. And again, that's what I am referring to when I said if you went into this pandemic with significant assets, you're actually much better off as a direct result of the quantitative easing or the Federal Reserve putting their finger on the scale and continuing to increase the inequity in wealth between those who have and those who do not have. So what can we do with it? If the Federal Reserve is one of the primary reasons why we have inflation, if the Federal Reserve is the primary reason why we have this wealth inequality, because it is very real and it has nothing to do with the color of someone's skin or someone's gender. It has a direct result to do with if you are a part of the have, the top 10%, and if you are part of the bottom 90%. So if the Federal Reserve is the reason for all of this, why are we not having legislators pivot very hard, very rapidly, and begin to modify or clarify the mandates of the Federal Reserve? All last year, we had those within the Federal Reserve and Democrats throughout talking about inflation as transitory, as if it was going to go away. It is not going to go away. We all recognize that. I spent 3 months with the farmers here in Pennsylvania and hearing their stories. This was not going to go away. People were not experiencing shortages at the grocery store because we were doing so well and buying so much. It was because of what was happening. So truly one of the best things we can do, elect me into the Senate. I want to sit on the banking committee, and I will be one of the loudest voices in clarifying the Fed's mandates. It was very interesting that as we saw the job report come out in mid-January, when the Fed began to see Black people, Hispanic, non-college educated people begin to get employed, and their level of employment began to go back to pre-pandemic levels. All of a sudden, they dropped the whole narrative of transitory inflation and said, oh my goodness, look, this inflation is really bad. People are getting employed. Too many people are making money. Their wages are beginning to increase. We need to now stop it. But when the stock market was booming and those who were rich was getting richer, the Federal Reserve said nothing. They actually continued to spend that money.
Kathy Barnette, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for offering up some perspective about the haves and have-nots and how the wealth divide might actually increase as a result of inflation in this country. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Kathy.